Rabbi, welcome back to Yerushalmi Terumot. We're holding up Rishon. We're going to go back to Halacha base, okay, which is Daf Tes on the base. So we were talking about Hafroshas Truma from olives for oil and grapes for wine. Now, Ein Termin Zaysim ala Shemen V'Le'anovim ala Yain. So let's say you've got olives and you've got oil, which is Tevel, or grapes and wine, which is Tevel. You cannot separate some of the olives as truma for the olives and the oil, or some of the grapes as truma for the grapes and the wine. The im tarma, if you did, Beis Shammai amim trumas atzman. Now, so Beis Shammai holds that what you've done is chal a bit on the olives and on the grapes. Some of them will be now sorted, but the oil and the wine will not be. They will remain tevel. Beis Hillel remain trumas and truma. Beis Hillel say nothing at all. Nothing's happened. It's not chal even on the olives and the grapes. Now, we said in our halacha that according to Beis Hillel, olives for oil or grapes for wine is nothing at all. It doesn't work. Now, we've got a steer between what we've learned elsewhere. Taman Tanina, we've learned, this is later on, Ein Tamin v'Davar Shnigma Melachta, Davar Shalei Nigma Melachta. Don't take truma, something not complete for something else not complete, or something not complete on something which is complete, and if you did, but the truma is valid. So there, if you did, it's valid. Here we're saying that if you take truma from olives for oil or grapes for wine, which is not nigma malachtai for something which is nigma malachtai, according to Beis Hillel, but it doesn't help. So the Gemara answers, the case here, truma from olives on oil or grapes of wine, is a kanas. That it doesn't help. So the reason we're told is because you're stealing from the tribe. So what do you mean stealing from the tribe? What loss is there for the Kohen by separating truma from olives for oil or grapes for wine? Rav Hanania said, separating truma from olives for oil or grapes for wine, there is a loss. The Kohen has to bother taking the oil out of the olives he receives. He has to press it all. Or creating the wine out of the grapes. Now, I understand that. Wait a minute. What about if you've got, let's say, a bit of a rice kernel sort of thing, which the shell has not been taken off. Now, there's a lot of bother removing all the shell, and you separated for it. You used it to separate for rice, which is already, the shell's already been taken off. So basically, there's bother there. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it shouldn't work, and yet the Mishnah doesn't say that it doesn't work. It definitely does work. So the Gemara answers, look, grinding a bit of rice is only a little bother. The Cohen would rather receive it in its husk and grind it bit by bit as he needs it. Therefore, the truma is valid. It's not the same as olives and grapes, but there's a lot of bother to produce the wine and the oil. He says, what happens if you've got crops which were not threshed? There's a lot of bother, and you separated from them for produce which is complete. According to Rabbi Yochanan, it should be not valid, and yet the Mishnah only mentions olives and grapes. So you want to answer, Rav Hanania had this problem on Rabbi Yochanan's answer. So Rabbi Yochanan wanted to say, it's Torah and so on. But, over here it seems, and there's a lot of Terucha, and there doesn't seem to be a problem. So why not? So what's the answer here? Let's see. Rav Mana Layama came. He didn't learn, like Rav Hanania, what's Gezel HaShevet. He didn't explain that. Ella, he explained, when you're separating truma for oil, humavakesh, you want litrom lefi shemen, you want to separate truma based on the share fitting for the liquid measurement of the oil. And when you take truma from the olives, you're going to make a mistake and you'll separate truma according to the volume of the olives. Right? And that is less than, the oil is less than the volume of the olives, where it's come from. So if you're going to look at the share truma and you're separating how much to separate, without looking at the oil, you basically end up giving the Cohen less oil than what you are obligated, and that is Gezel HaShevet.
Because you can't tell what oil's in that.
You don't know the volume. You're not going to get the volumes right. He says, Agatz Mocha. He says, whatever happens, Shataram, let's say he took Truma, olives for oil, Lifia Shemen, according to the amount of oil. So there's just Gezel, as it were. Now, according to Ramana, the Truma should be valid, and yet the Mishnah seems to say it's not valid. So the Gemara answers, even if you do this, and you separate Truma like the right share for the amount of oil, we're still worried, because Man Chayr and Lo Avad Kain, next time you won't do that. You'll separate it according to the olives. Therefore, the Chachamim and Masak and Hafrosh is not Chal, even if you separated the right amount. Not only that, we're worried people will see you separating Truma from olives for oil, and they will separate olives for oil. But they'll say, look, this person separated Truma, the amount of olives, because he wants to give a bit more. He's a generous lad. But I don't intend to be machmir on myself to add to the shiur. I'll do what my obligation is. And he'll end up separating for the oil according to the volume of the olives. So to prevent this, the Chachamim Mesakin, that when you separate from the olives for the oil of the Truma is not chal, even if you separated the right amount. You hear that? People are worried that you're either doing a bit more, or that he's being machmir, that's why he did a bit extra. But we don't need to bother with all that. Now, according to Beis Shammai, one who takes truma from the olives for the oil, we said it's not chal on the oil, but trumas atzman bahem. You are being masak in the olives. What does that mean? What about other cases where the truma is not chal? Is there trumas atzman bahem? Are you masaking some of it? Chizkiah Amar says, Lo Amru. When the Beis Shammai say trumas atzman bahem, that is, you're separating olives, zeisim ala shemen, and novim ala yain, grapes for wine. Right? So Beis Shammai holds the truma is not chal on the oil and the wine, but it helps be masakin the olives and the grapes. Oh, shakol advarim. Other matters where the truma is not chal, like chil for ptur, lie. They never said the truma is going to help. In that situation, it's not chal at all. On the other hand, on Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said no, lo sham, there's no difference. And he zeisim ala shemen novim ala yain. The same then applies if you separate olives for oil or grapes for wine. He shakol advarim. That's the same thing with other things as well. So just like separating truma from olives for oil and grapes for wine, Beis Shammai hold the truma is not chal on the oil and the wine, but it's chal on the olives and the grapes. So also, when the situation is the truma is not chal based on the will of the one who's giving it, the view is that the truma is chal on the parents themselves if he's given them a name of truma. So he's saying, let's see this again. Yeah, it's chal on the zeisam anovim. You can give them a shem truma. All right. Chavraya b'shem Rav Yochanan. The Chachamim in the name of Rav Yochanan. Beis Shammai hold you separate the olives for the oil. It's truma satzim. The truma is on them. Afilu alata. Even if you separated from olives for olives and oil in one go. So we're saying it doesn't work, right? Olives for olives and oil. Even though you're doing it in one go together, it doesn't work. Rav Yochanan, Rav Yochanan, they said, according to Beis Shammai, if you separate from olives for olives and oil, the truma is chal on the olives. Now, there's two lots of olives here. There's olives in the container, and there's the sort of olives in your hand. That's what I want to say. The truma is not chal on the oil. Some of the olives in your hand are not truma, they're tevel. The truma is chal also on these other parts. There's like the other olives as well. Let's see this again. He wants to say, Divrei Beis Shammai, if you separate truma from olives for olives and oil, the truma is chal not only on the olives in like the trough in the container. Is that how they put it there? Also on the olives in your hand. Because Nasek Ka'omer, it's like one who says, Harezu truma aleha. This should be truma on the olives themselves. You've given them a name truma, Baal Shedamaton, and what you find below in the container. He says here, note 17, he says, you might have thought the view of Beis Shammai, Trumas Chal only on the olives Shavarema. What does that mean? In the trough, in the container there, but not on those in your hand. The one who has intention to take truma didn't have intention to include them. His kavanah is all the olives in his hand should become truma. Therefore, the olives in his hands, some are truma and some are tebel. And Yochanan explains that wasn't the intention, but when you separate truma for olives, your kavanah is to pater all the olives that have an obligation. Yeah? It's as if you're saying beferish that truma should be chal, allow all that's connected with it, anything which has an obligation. That's what you're separating truma for. Okay? Rezu truma allow b'masha lemata. Okay. Chananya Savamema, he wanted to say, B'minai, Beis Shammai's din, that truma is chal on the olives in the mixture, let's say in the trough, and also on some of the ones in his hand. That's if there's only that type, only olives in that container. If there's another type, like figs in there, then the truma is not chal on the olives which are there. Because separating truma needs to be in a mixture. It's like shalom and amukuf. You know that. There's a din that when you separate truma, you have to be near the produce at the time. So if you're separating truma for something which is a mixture, right, figs and whatever, then that's shalom and amukuf. That's considered you're not there at the time. You're not meant to do that. Therefore, in this situation, the truma is chal only on the olives in his hand. This again. So he wants to say, yeah, it's only if there's only one type. If you've got a mixture like figs as well, the truma is not chal on the olives in the container, because separating truma on one type which you find in the mixture is considered hafasha shlem and amukuf. As we said, you've got to be nearby at the time. The truma is chal only on the olives. Now, we said Rav Hanania said the name of Yochanan. According to Beis Shammai, the truma is chal on the olives in your hand and the olives in the container. And as if you're saying harezu truma aleho, basically on part of the olives which are in my hand and also on the bits in the container. Now, Armin of Zira, he says, Lo tikavan alach kain. Don't agree with that which you said in the name of Yochanan. It's like someone who's saying truma aleha v'ashalamatan, right? The truma should be on the top and what's on the bottom. He said that can't be. Once you say this is truma on it, nifta masha biyadai, then whatever's in your hand is now potter from truma, v'hashar, and the rest in your hand, which is not truma, becomes chulin, becomes ordinary chulin now. Corrected chulin. And since the olives in your hand become chulin, they can't be truma on the olives in the trough. You understand? Basically, all that you've got has become chulin now. You can't use that to make it truma for what's in the containers. He says, v'chulin, poitrin, esat tevel, chulin, which is masukin, which is now potter chulin, that can cover and exempt tevel. It can't do it. Peres tevel can be truma for something else. So Amar Chanani reads of Hillel, the reason why the truma can be chal, whether it's the olives in his hand or the olives in the container, basically it's chal on both at the same time, ka'achas. The Kiven Sha'ama, since he says Harei Zu, this should be truma in one go, Nifta Masha Biyadav and Nifta Masha Maton. Whatever's in his hand is patur, and whatever's below in the mixture is also mutter, right? It's all patur. And therefore there's no hafrashas truma from chulin to tevel. Basically everything becomes patur. It's chal on both together. Rezu truma in one go, nifta mash b'yodi nifta mash, everything becomes patur here. There's no hafrashas truma mechulin al tevel. Now we said truma is not chal on a fruit mixed with other species. So Amar Chanina, the dinner of Chananya, if you take truma for a fruit mixed with other species, is not chal. Nirin advarim, that makes sense with truma gedola, because there's a din you have to be right there at the time, right? You have to be there and have it in front of you, right? And it's considered otherwise it's truma shalom and amukuf. But trumas maser, when it comes to trumas maser, you can be torem also on the fruit in a mixture of other fruit. Yeah, trumas maser, it doesn't have to be min amukuf. It doesn't have to be right in front of you, next to you. You can do it for a mixture which is with other fruit. The reason is because trumas maser sricha sh'tehem etzum semes. It's got to be an exact amount. B'midah bishkal of a minion, right? With measure, weight, number. Therefore, you've got to be exact. Therefore, there's no chiyuv to be Torem it from what's next to you. Yeah? You don't have to put the exact amount next to you. You have to be Torem the exact amount. You know how we get around that, Rabbi say? What do we get around that? We say, achas mimea, 1 in 100, which is here. Out of that 10 will be Trumas Maaser. Yeah? So Hashem knows what that 1 in 100 is. So we're exact. We don't want to give more. We say exactly 1 in 100. Yeah? That's what we do. And we make that Trumas Maaser. Okay. Truma Gedola is 1 in 50, according to Bailani. The normal amount of Truma Gedola is 1 in 50. The Trumas Maaser is 1 in 100. Okay. The reason for the difference between Truma Gedola, where you have to have it in front of you, and Trumas Maaser, where you don't, is because Truma Gedola is with estimation. So the Chacham were worried if the fruit won't be in front of you, you won't be able to have a proper kavanah as to what the estimation is. Trumas Maaser, since anyway you have to get the exact amount, so there's no difference if they're in front of you or not. Okay? Right. Yeah. There's no difference in front of you if anyway it has to be the exact amount. Alright. Where are we? Taman Taninan. We've learnt Ein Tomim min Atame ala Tahar. You hear that? You can't take Truma from Tevel, which is Tameh, for fruit, which is Tevel, which is Tahar. If you did, it's valid. If you're intentional, it's not valid. V'tani lezer braysa, Shem Rabbi Yossi, Terim min Atame ala Tahar. If you did, Bein b'shogig, Bein b'mezid. Wherever your kavanah was, Masha asa b'diavad, it's effective. Ma Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi hold here? About separating truma from olives for oil, or grapes for wine. Does he hold shogig and mezid is valid? So Rabbi Yossi is actually arguing on the Talmud Kama, who said in the name of Beis Hillel that truma is not valid. Is he saying it is valid? So Gemara says, "Ma'in taman." If already separating from tamei for tahar, shukula hefsed kohen. Truma tamei is everyone. You completely can't eat it. Kohen can't eat it. Nevertheless, at Ama Masha also what's done is done. Hacha was separating olives for oil. The aim kulai hefsed olives for oil. Look, he's getting oil. It's not such a loss. L'kohenim loish kol shekain. That what you've done should be effective. Ashkach Toni, we find a brayso from Shem Rabbi Yossi. Ein tovim zeisim ala shemen. You must now separate olives for oil. Beloy anavim ala yayin, not grapes for wine. If you did, Beis Shammai say it helps for the fruit that's here. Beis Hillel arrange must have truma. Beis Hillel say it doesn't work. So what do we see? That Rabbi Yossi agrees with the Tana of our Mishnah. According to Beis Hillel, is not chal. But Harav she does it, Rabbi Yossi. We have a contradiction because Tamam, with separating truma from tamei for tahar, he says whatever's done is done. Masha asa but it works. But separating from olives for oil, he says it doesn't work. So how do you understand this? So my answer is Tamam, with separating tamei for tahar, Rabbi Yossi holds, but Mezid it works. Because Tuma Eina Masud, Tuma is very rare. The Ein B'nei Adam Tayin Lema Shetabin Mashin Zelzeh. People are going to start, they're not going to start saying, oh, you can be Torah this for that. Right? It's very uncommon. There's no Chachamim didn't agree of it. But olives for oil and grapes for wine, Mitzuin is very common. If you're going to tell me the Trumas Chal B'di'evet, yeah, then Afhusav Meima, then you're going to think Shemot Tzeditrom Zeisim on Hashem, and you can go ahead separate olives for oil, V'anavim Alayayin, and grapes for wine. So if we tell you, people are going to make a mistake, basically. So to prevent people making a mistake, Rabbi says you should be machmir more than the case of Tamei for Tahar. So even B'di'evet, it's not going to work, right? We're not going to say B'di'evet it works, we're going to say even B'di'evet it doesn't work. Okay. Halacha Gimel, yeah? You cannot take truma from leket shekroper. Benahefka. Blem master rishon shenit la trumase. Or master rishon, where the truma's already been taken. what it means is Trumas Maaseh has been taken, yeah, from that produce. Nor can you take from Maaseh Sheni or Hekdesh that's been redeemed. We're talking here about Maaseh Sheni Hekdesh, which have not had Truma taken. They were redeemed, they've gone to Chulin. I mean, if it's Truma been taken, then it's like Chulin. Definitely you can't be toned for any other Tevel. Although it wasn't separated Truma Gedola, you cannot use it to separate Truma Gedola for elsewhere. Okay, that's what he's saying over here. Okay, so where are we? Right. So whichever way around is forbidden. Now you cannot separate from that which is detached from the ground for something connected to the ground. The other way around. Not from the new grain for the old grain, the old grain for the new grain. You cannot separate Paris of Eretz Yisrael for fruit from abroad. Paris Chuzla or Paris Aretz, or the other way around. In Talmud, if you did, Angel Moss and Truma is not valid. Okay, so now we said you cannot separate Truma from Leket Shikhopeah or Hefka. And the reason is they're potter from Trumas and Maasros. Okay, so now Rabbi Yaakov Shem Rabbi Yanai, he says there, Achad Mishloshim V'Kroyas Mechuvarin B'Torah. This is one of the clear psukim in the Torah. What does it say with Truma? The Levi will come to take his Maserishon. He has no share with you. It's been that which you have ownership, and he has got no right to it. You have to give him Maser. As opposed to Yatsa Hefka, your hand and the Levi are equal in it. You don't have to give him Maser from it. He leket, he shikha, he peah, he hefka. And basically, leket, shikha, peah, no different from this type of hefka. It's your hand and the Levi's got an equal share, and therefore leket, shikha, peah are all potter from Maestros, right? It's the same thing. All of them are completely potter. Now we've already learnt all these dinim. The side is you can't separate Truma of P'tur al Chiyuv. And then Mishnah adds on, not from Chiyuv of P'tur. I mean, what's it adding on? Not from P'tur al Chiyuv. What's it adding on? He says, Keni Masnisa, this is Gavan of the Mishnah, Lamed Chayv of P'tur, V'loim Peres Shavir Shlish, you cannot take Truma from fruit which is grown a third, which is Chayav Maisres, a Peres Shaloyavir Shlish. Another fruit which hasn't grown a third, which is not Chayav Maisres. Right, or Paris which are not grown a third for the others. So the Mishnah is telling you another situation which was not mentioned earlier on. You hear that? So you cannot take if it's grown a third for that which is not grown a third, whatever it is. Okay? The Taram, Angel must say Truma. If you took Truma, it doesn't work. Right? So you shouldn't take Truma olives for oil. It's machlokes what happens if you did. According to Beis Shammai, Trumas Asman Hain, it works a bit, right? According to Beis Hillel, it's not valid at all. If we bring Machlokes Samarai, what do Beis Shammai hold in our Mishnah? He says, we said in our Mishnah, if you're separating Truma from Chiyuv for P'tur, it's not Chal at all. According to Chizkiah, Divrei HaKol. Everyone holds this, and Beis Shammai agreed to it. Right? As far as separating Truma, olives for oil, Beis Shammai holds the Truma is in itself. Right? Whereas here, Chiv of P'tur, he's saying everyone agrees it's no good. Machlokes is an argument. And Mishnah is like the view of Beis Hillel, but according to Beis Shammai, if you went and took Trumas Atzmon, it becomes Truma from itself, just like they hold with the Hafrashas Trumas and Maestros of oil. So they say it's effective. Yeah, it's effective for the oil that's in that mixture. Okay, so who have we got here? According to Chizkiah, Divrei HaKol. That everyone will agree it's only Truma Zeisim on Shemen where Beis Shammai say it's Truma Satzma name, it works. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's not so straightforward. Okay. So he says here in the notes, so according to Beis Shammai, Truma is not chal on the oil, but it's chal on the olives, which you can go and take them for the sake of truma. So the olives in your hand, some are truma and some are chulin. According to Beis Hillel, they hold the truma is not chal at all. So the olives that you take for the sake of truma is tebel. Yeah, it doesn't work. It's not effective at all. Okay. Halacha? Done it. Okay. Five should not take truma. And if they did, in Talmud, Trumas and Truma. Ha'ilem. What's an ilaim, Rabbi say? This ilaim is someone who can hear and can't speak. V'hashikar, when he's drunk. V'ha'aron, and someone who is not clothed. V'hasuma, and someone who is blind. Ubalkei, someone who has had an omission. Lo Yisrael, they shouldn't take truma. V'im Talmud, Trumas and Truma. If they did, it is valid. Yeah. Of course, you know, the share of Hafrosh's truma is either 1 in 40, 1 in 50, 1 in 60. And you can't take it measured. You have to give it as an estimation. Okay. By the way, the din of not taking truma measured, but only by estimation, many Rishonim bring this as a rabbinical din. We want you to be generous. That's the reason behind it. Yeah, we want you to be generous. The Rambam learns the Torah never gave a share to Truma Gedola. It just says Reishis Degoncha. It is mashma that the Truma should be an estimation. So though the Chachamim gave a shiur, right, they said the shiur that's needed, but it should be with estimation. So although yes, 1 in 40, 1 in 50, but it should be through estimation. Okay. Now, Minat Torah, there's no share for Truma Gedola, but Chachamim gave a share. So let's see. Ein Tomin Leiva Midav, Leiva Mishkav, Leiva Minyan. You cannot separate Truma not with measuring, weight, numbers. You have to do an estimation. You can, once it's already been counted. Yeah, I was going to explain this piece actually. When you shouldn't use some of these containers, when they're full, they've got a measure, and we know, that container is a liquid kiloliter, whatever it is. Even though you have no intention to measure, but you are able to do chetzion shlisha, maybe a half or a third of these containers. But lo Yisrael, you should not take truma, but you shouldn't use it's a material, it's an implement, which you can use to work out a sar. Right? Even if you just do chetzia midah, half is also a size. So it's a way to make a sign with half of it, for the sake of midah and half a sar. Basically, you're taking truma with a keli which has got a measuring on it, and we don't want you to do that. Okay? Fine. Now, why these 5 cases mentioned in our Mishnah that you're not allowed to separate truma? Let's see. Yesh mehem yunei bracha. Some of the cases where we said they shouldn't take truma, the problem is they can't say the bracha. But yesh mehem yunei she'eni yochanin lishma min hamuvcha. Some of them don't have a clear mind. Therefore, what? They won't take truma properly. Okay, so let's see. Ha'ilei, the one who can hear and not speak. Ve'arum, the one who is unclothed. The balkeri, the one with the emission. B'pnei, they can't say the bracha. Right? B'nei bracha, they can't say the bracha. And b'diavad is valid because the bracha is not ma'akev. Hasuma, one which is blind, v'hashikar, and one which is drunk, right? They can't separate truma. They can't take truma from, right? They can't take truma from, let's say, the choice amount. The person's blind; he doesn't know what's the right amount, so he can't do it. But the evidence, if he did, is valid, right? It's not ma'akev, but the evidence works. Abu Barav Hunam, he says shosoi, someone who is drunk. Ideally, shosoi means you drunk a bit. Yeah, you drunk a bit more than normal. Ali's father, he shouldn't pray. Shmonesrei. If he did, okay, it's considered he's fulfilled his obligation. Shikha, someone who's completely drunk, Ali's father, don't bother davening. And if you did, mispalel tefilasa gidufin, his tefillah is full of swearing, as it were, yeah, blasphemy, and he should go and daven again. Ezehu shasoi. What does it mean? Someone who's drunk a bit. Kosher shasa revis. He's drunk a revis of wine. And what's shikar? The one who's drunk kosher shasa yosef, more than a revis of wine. Taman Amri and Bava, they said that shikar is anyone who's drank wine, the amount of shikrus. He can't speak before the king. He hasn't got enough decency because of his situation to actually speak before the king. He says shikar marsha Yivarech is someone who's drunk. Can he say Berachas Hamazon? Amalei Ravesi said, it is V'acharta, V'savata, Uveirachta. Yeah? We learn you'll be satisfied, you're blessed. We learn that you can say Berachas Hamazon, V'afilim Medumdum, even if he's a bit drunk, really. Even though he can't speak properly. Huh? What? Yeah, he's Medumdum, he's dozy a bit. The question didn't need to be asked, only the following. That this person who's drunk, can he read Shema? That's the question. Aaron, someone who's naked, can he read Shema? Amalei says, no, you mustn't have an abomination. And we're learning Erev Divur. It's telling you at the time when you're speaking, there should be no error around. Tiny Chizkiah learned the following brisa. Bein likrois is orum, someone who's naked is not allowed. Bein likrois, whether to read Krishma, bein levarech, or to make any brachas. Okay. And, okay. Let's see what they say on this. He says the Gemara remains with the suffix. There are more passages l'chumra. The shikha is not allowed to read Shema. Other said Rosha. He says to summarize, the Kriya Shema is considered, as far as Kriya Shema, it's like a shikha. There's a suffix if he can read or not. But Orum, if he's not wearing anything, it's poshet that he cannot read. Okay. Right. Ben Nikos Ben Nevarach. Where are we now? Tani Chizkiah Ben Nikos Ben Nevarach. Ein time in midah. You mustn't measure, not in kalim with vessels with measuring sizes. Tamon Taninan Hamoina Meshubach. We've learnt elsewhere, one who counts the fruit, Meshubach. Actually, it's a good thing to measure. Hamoided, like counting, and moided, measuring the volume. Meshubach is even better. V'hashaykel, and weighing it up. That sounds the best. Meshubach Mishlashtan. So we see that you can measure all these things. And here we said that no, you have to be in estimation. What's going on? Levi, Kam, and Mishnah, where you're taking truma of estimation, is b'truma gedaila. Truma gedaila is estimation. Kam, where we think you should be exact, but trumas maaseh. Trumas maaseh is exactly 100th. Right? And we bring a brisa, and you see the Makor, you see the main drush in the Torah you should do, but Ahmed is with Truma Gedolah is an estimation. The Tony came and learned in the Bryce, said, yes, man, go Maloma. Mina, Yinshin Tomed, Live Mida, Live Mishkal, Live Minyan, it has to be estimation. Tamaloma Menachshav Lachem, Terumaschem, be considered for you your Truma, but Nachshav we learn Machshava, with your thoughts, with your estimation, Aterem. Bein Aterem B'mida Mishkal Minyan, you cannot use the exact sizes, exact measures. Now the word Terumaschem sounds like Trumas Masa the Levim from the Masa. And it says it should be Kadogon Ben Agoren. This is like Truma Gedola, like what Yisrael are doing. So it sounds like Ma Truma Gedola B'Machshava. Truma Gedola should do with estimation. Of Trumas Masa Machshava. Maybe Trumas Masa should also be with estimation. But the Chachamim argue on Elazar Ben Govel. They say no, Truma Gedola is estimation, but Trumas Masa you have to be exact. So you see from this price, even Elazar Ben Govel agrees, the main drasha you should separate with estimation is said with Truma Gedola, right? Truma Gedola is, yes, you have to be estimation, and Trumas Masa has to be exact. Okay, we've learned to the end of the Mishnah, you can separate truma, that which is counted and weighed, etc. He seems to go against what we said before, that you shouldn't start giving truma with measure. And now we seem to say you can. Rav Elazar said, that which we said in the Sefer Yotom, that which is measured and weighed and counted, Kirim as Nisa, this trying the Mishnah, Moeded Adam as Tivloi, you measure your tebel, when you measure your tebel from where you're going to separate your truma, and you want to estimate how much, so this is like helping you, so you'll have an estimation of a vad shalayitraim b'midah. You can't take truma with measure. Yeah? We're not worried, maybe because you're measuring the tevel, you'll start measuring the truma itself. You hear that? You're measuring the tevel, so that way you know an estimation of what to do for truma. That's what you're allowed to do. But however, you mustn't take truma with measure. And also, that which we said you can take truma, that which is weighed, it means, Sheikel Adam Tivla, you can weigh up your tevel, bring it in your house, but you mustn't take truma b'mishkel with the weights. And that which we said you can take truma, that which is counted, Mainehu Adam Tivla, yes, you can count your tevel, bring it in your house, but again, you mustn't take truma with an exact number. So there we are. We got that clear, Rabbi Sai. Yeah? You can take truma with you can do the tevel. You can measure the tevel. You can weigh the tevel. Whatever it is. But when you start separating the truma, it has to be ba'omed, right? It has to be with estimation. The truma gedola has to be with estimation. And we'll come again later on to trumas maaseh, which must not be with estimation. And that has to be exact. You cannot separate oil for olives which are ground to produce their oil. So this is an earlier stage in their process, right? They began to grind them, but not all the oil has come out yet. Some say it's the olives that they're going to grind them. Alright, so you cannot separate oil for these olives. Don't separate wine for these grapes that are being pressed, because you cannot be separating something complete for something not complete. In term, and if you did, truma is valid minat Torah, but according to Rabbanan, you should go and take truma again after you finish the grinding of the olives and pressing of the grapes. So you should go and take truma again. We don't want you to do it. And if you did, it's valid, but with Rabbanan you have to do it again. But in Torah it's a valid truma, but the Chachamim and Masakin, once you finish grinding the olives and pressing the grapes, you go and take truma again on the olives and on the wine, rather on the oil and on the wine, which has come out. Alright? Now, so what are you doing in this situation? You have taken truma first time, but you shouldn't have done it because you're taking something which is finished for something not finished. So what did we tell you to do, Rabbi Isai? If you did it, we want you to take truma again. So what's the difference between taking the truma the first time and the second time? So you did it once, we said Minat Torah is valid, but we want you to take truma again. So what's the din of how effective is that second truma? What happens if it falls in mixtures? Because Minat Torah you didn't need to take that second truma. But Rabbanan said you have to take the second truma. So he says here, Rishayna ledamas b'fnei. Well, the first truma you took is proper truma. If it falls in a mixture, it's a problem. How much do you need against truma, Rabbi Sai? 100. You need 100 times against the truma. Otherwise, it's meduma. It's a mixture. It's a vid mixture, right? So, and no one will be able to eat it, whatever it is. So, Rishayna ledamas b'fnei. So the first truma is a proper valid truma and would cause a problem if there was not 100 against it. If Yisrael eats it b'shogeg, you have to pay a fifth. So the Cohen, the principal, and a fifth, like truma, proper truma. Right? The first truma was proper truma from the Torah. But that doesn't apply with the second truma, because the second truma was only a rabbinical obligation, right? Minat Torah was not truma at all. Minat Torah, you got the truma right the first time. It's the second time that's the problem. That's only Drabbana, and therefore it doesn't have all the same problems, same chumras. But Shemen al Zeisem Anech Bashin. Right. you can separate oil, not olives, oil, for olives which are about to be there ready to eat. V'yayin ala novim, and wine for grapes which are round about to be used lasos and simukin, to make raisins and to eat them as they are. Misha time shaman ala zeisim la'achila, if you separated oil for olives which are for eating, the zeisim al zeisim la'achila, and olives for olives that are for eating. So either you did olives for olives, and they're all there for eating, so whatever it is, v'yayin ala novim, wine for grapes, la'achila, which were there ready to eat. V'anovim, and grapes, or you did grapes, ala novim, on other grapes, ready to eat. So when you did it, it was the same standard, right? The things were from the same stage. But then you changed your mind. You decide, right, I'm going to take these olives, I'm going to press them. Right, I'm going to press the grapes. Hey, and now these are now considered unfinished because I'm going to add another stage. You don't have to take truma again because at the time when you did it, they were there ready to eat. They had a din like wine, right? At the time when you did it, it was valid. Now later on you change your mind. Don't separate truma on something which is complete for something not complete. Nor for something not complete for something complete. Don't take from something not complete for something not complete. And even so, in Taramu, if you did Trumas and Truma, it is valid. Okay? So what we got? Who's in that list? Complete for not complete? No. Not complete for complete? Definitely not. Not complete for not complete? Also not. But if you did in any of these things, the truma is valid. Now we said you can't take oil for olives which are ground a bit, and not wine for the grapes which are pressed. If you did, it takes truma, but you have to take truma again. So we're going to ask a contradiction between this din in the last part of the Mishnah. We said in the last part of this Mishnah, you cannot take truma, something complete for something not complete. And if you did, it's valid. We didn't say go and do it again. We said you shouldn't do it, but if you did, it's valid. The here, in the Reisha, oil for olives which are being pressed, or wine for grapes which are being trodden, we're saying you've got to go and take truma again. What's the difference between the Reisha and the Sefer? In the Reisha, you're like being Torem, something complete, for done something not complete. Why take truma again? Rav Hillel, Rabbi Yochanan, right. He says the reason why we want you to take truma again. Listen to this, Rabbi Isai. The Cohen's in all knows where in the country, and he's gonna mechatos, the red heifer water. Who needs that? Who uses it? So we want to encourage the Cohen to eat more truma, so he'll need to use the mechatos. It will be on people's minds. So he says, there's a geder because we don't want people to forget the water, the red heifer. The Chachamim wanted we don't it to be without a job. Right? So the case is like this. In one case, the truma which you set aside got lost. And the Chacham said, go and take truma again. Right? They want the people to use the mechatas. We don't want to forget the Torah's mechatas. So they said, if you take truma wrongly, and if it gets lost, that's clear. The main distinction is if it gets lost. If the first truma got lost, you have to go and take truma again, in order that the Kohen should receive the truma, and he'll have to be mitahir himself with the mechatas to go and eat this truma. And the Sefer is talking about a case where the first truma is still there. So then there's no reason to put a decree that go and take truma again in order that mechatas shouldn't be forgotten. Because whatever happens, the Kohen needs to purify himself because of the first truma. So basically there's cases where the first truma gets lost, then we say take truma again. Take truma again because mechatas, we want the Kohen to use mechatas. Whereas if the truma is still there, then we don't have to come on to that. So he says here, if you went, in cases where it's forbidden to take truma, but if you did, the truma is valid, you don't have to go and take it again. Then how would we understand this with the din in the Reisha, which says when you take from oil for olives, which is something complete or something not complete, you have to go and take truma again. So we answered that one of the differences is if it's lost or not. You see, if it's lost or not. If it's lost, then we want you to take truma again. Okay. Well, the Mepharshim ask, we make a distinction, something is not complete for something complete, but the Eved, the truma is valid. In challah we say, if you separate challah from flour, right? It's a very early stage. Separating challah from flour, it's not chal. What's the difference between challah and truma? Surely it's the same issue, like separating truma, shloim and agomor, and issue of roshas challah from the flour. It's all learnt from the same place. So you're saying if you separate challah from flour, it's no good. If you separate truma from something not complete, it is good. So the answer, the Rosh says, as far as truma, we find in the Torah that Torah shloim and agomor, but the ebed is valid. We find it's valid because the Torah tells us that Maser Rishon, if you separate the Levi's share before the Gemar Malacha, it's potter from Truma Gedola, and you see Hafroshas Meiser before Gemar Malacha, it helps b'diavad. It's actually potter from Truma in such a case. And if Maser would not be Chal, why is these things potter from Truma Gedola? Basically, it is Chal. It's at an earlier stage, and you're potter from Truma. Okay. So that's what they want to see. We see this idea. Others learn that truma, the din is to be Torah min agomor, when it's complete, that's only a rabbinical din. And when we bring a pasuk, we don't really mean it. So the Chacham who are not machmir, the takana b'diavad, it shouldn't help. It's only a drabanan din. But challah, the din is to be Torah min agomor, like from the dough is min Torah, so it could be challah is more severe than truma. Okay. I think we will stop here, Rabbi Simon. Yeah? All right.